Wounded, another Iraqi writhes on the ground. The Marines kill him, then cheer.
Like, man, these guys are dead now, you know. But it was a good feeling. And afterwards, you're like, hell yeah, that was awesome. Let's do it again.
Men and women between the ages of 18 and 39 now face the very real possibility of being drafted. If you don't believe in war, one legal alternative to military service is to establish yourself as a conscientious objector. This video will tell you everything you need to know about how to successfully prepare your conscientious objector claim.
Peace now! Peace now! Peace now! Peace now! Peace now! Peace.
Why healthcare workers and all males and females between the ages of 17 and 39 need to establish their claims. If you don't have a claim, then you basically have waived your rights. And so you have to petition the government to establish your claim. Well, the easy way to do that is to actually write a letter to your congressional delegation. You have a military liability or a liability of military conscription that goes from the age of 17 to 39. And so in that period of time, those people are going to change over. They will not be the same people because of the way that terms have been negotiated for our senators and congressmen and for the president and so forth. So what you have to do is you have to make it a point, let's say when your birthday comes around every year, to make sure that if you have a new congressional representative, that you alert that person that you live in their district and that you are a conscientious objector to war. So what you do whenever you correspond with an authority like that of the federal government, of course they are authorities by definition, is you use the technique that's easily available to you here at the U.S. Postal Service. You send your letter by certified mail. You don't need to get a response from a hawk because they're ticked off at you because you're a dove, okay? All you need is the record that's maintained for 2 years by the local postal service that you sent that letter. And then you kind of have to mark on a calendar or discuss this with your parents or somebody to remind you that that's all going to expire within 2 years. So you just go back and your next letter in 2 years, let's say to Norm Dix, is going to be, Representative Dix, I just want to let you know it's been 2 years since I mailed you, a letter about the fact that I am a conscientious objector to war based upon religious, underlined 3 times, ethical, moral, and beliefs. And this is just to update you on the fact that I'm still a conscientious objector to war who happens to live in your district. See what I mean? So you have to come back to this every 2 years. The first thing you should do to establish your claim is you should get these little form letters, 1 or 2 lines in your own words, establishing yourself as being a resident in the district of the person that you're writing to, and establishing yourself just by your own statement as being a conscientious objector to war. You don't need to go into any significant details. And then you date it. You make copies because those copies are going to be important to you. That would then satisfy on an ongoing basis your notification to the federal branch of the government known as the legislative branch of the government. Okay, well, as you know, we have 3 branches of government. So having completed your process of notification to the legislators, you then need to move to the process of notifying the executive branch of the government. And the responsible agency is going to be the Selective Service System itself. The law requires you to be available within 10 days in the event that they wish to send you a notice. As a matter of fact, there's a stiff penalty if you are not available within 10 days. We'll talk about that. All right? And the law requires you to keep them posted of any change of information, which normally would include phone number, address, and so forth. And so there is another form for you to keep your eye on at the local post office. It's the yellow form. This is the change of information form. Well, that's handy. That gives you another official record. You should have no trouble over a period of time. Let's say you start at 18, you revisit at the age of 20, you revisit at 22, 24, 26, and so on until you turn 39. You should have no difficulty establishing as a point of fact, as a point of legal fact, that you have meticulously observed your obligation to keep the Selective Service System informed of where you are and who you are and what your claim as a conscientious objector is all about. All right? Let me tell you now that the current order of call is age 20. So the 20-year-olds are going to be the ones that get the first notices. Okay? So it behooves the 20-year-olds to be able to say, well, you know, when I turned 18, I told you I was a conscious objector to war. And then I moved off to college and changed my residence, and then I gave you the change of information form, which told you that I'm a conscious objector to war. And I've written an updated letter to my federal legislators on this subject. And even before I registered, I wrote the initial letter to my federal legislators, so the legislative branch of the government has been notified. Okay? Now you see, by generating these kinds of records, and it all has to be done by hard copy, forget computers. You can use the application form itself, though when you use the application form, you'll find that you have to write on the application form because they've deliberately taken off of the application form what used to be there, which is, oh, by the way, are you a conscious objector to war? That was there when I had to deal with all this over 30 years ago. It's no longer in form. They took it off because they want you to be ignorant. They want you to be powerless. They want you to be uninformed about your constitutional rights. That's why I'm here. Feel free to scrawl over the top of that form, oh, by the way, I'm a conscious objector to war. And likewise, you're going to be making copies of the change of information forms, okay, so that you can authenticate when these were sent, and you have the receipt from the certified mail coupon for each one of these documents when it's referred on to the executive branch of the government. We want you to register. We want you to talk to recruiters. We don't want you to shy away from talking to recruiters because we know they're out there. We know that there are 8,000 full-time paid recruiters on bonus incentive programs that do what they do. What you do is you go up and say, well, hello, Sergeant so-and-so. I just wanted to have a chance to meet you, and I'd like to get your business card. They'll give you the business card. Then you can say, well, thank you. The reason I wanted to talk to you is because I wanted you to know that I'm a conscientious objector to war. And I've got, you know, your information. I know where your office is now, and I'm going to just jet a little note to you reminding you of our meeting here, and that I told you that I'm a conscious objector to war. Because one of the first things that happens when you become brought before the local board hearing is you're going to say, well, who have you told that you're a conscious objector to war? And you're going to be able to tell them, well, I told my federal legislators, I told the Selective Service System, I told the notary public there in my hometown, I told these military recruiters that I had a chance to meet along the way, and these are their business cards, and I'm ready to subpoena them, you know, as soon as the opportunity presents itself to confirm that we have a little discussion about this. In other words, we want to start using the system to meet our needs. There are other things that you can do. As an individual, and I recommend that you do this right away, you can endorse the Earth Charter. So it talks about how you promote a culture of tolerance, nonviolence, and peace. That you have available to you ways that you can now do a formal endorsement of a good quality vision for the future that you can then refer to as a secular document that you have personally endorsed. And you can do the whole thing by certified mail and just like with the other documents that you have. And then you can use what we call the fourth agent of the government. I think you all know what that is, the press. Keep in mind, it doesn't matter whether anybody publishes your letters or not. That's not the point. The point is, you wrote the letter. Okay, now there will be some elements of the free press, like in war times, where they'll probably publish your letter. And you can write your letter and you can say, I'm a conscious objector to war because I don't see that there's any accountability whatsoever on the part of the military-industrial complex of the United States. It's a total violation of the UN Charter, Chapter 6, total violation of the Geneva Accords. I mean, whatever your opinion happens to be. What's important is that you write the letter and that you send the letter by certified mail. Whether they publish it or not, you have to create your own documentation. You have to take the initiative using the information I've conveyed to you to actually set up your file and build your file and manage your file over time. That seems like an awful lot. Well, I can tell you right now, it's not nearly as much paperwork as I have to fill out to maintain the insurance on my automobiles. Okay? It's not nearly as much paperwork as I have to fill out to fulfill my federal tax obligations. So try to keep this in perspective. Yes, this is an additional burdensome, paper-laden process, but really when you think about it in perspective, it's not any more than you're being asked to do for these other mundane functions that I just related to you. Then, once you have these documents that have accumulated over a period of time, voila, you have the possibility of affixing these documents to what is known as an affidavit of fact. You just go to any notary public. It could be a notary public, let's say in your credit union or your financial aid office at school. You pay them a fee. It's a nominal fee. Usually, if they want to hit you on the high side, $10. Most of them will charge you maybe $5. And then what they will do is they will enter into the public record the fact that you appeared before them, that you identified yourself. You're going to use a driver's license, and you've got this little affidavit of fact that's been co-signed by 2 registered voters, okay, who are not related to you. That could be anybody as long as they're a registered voter, all right? And what they will do is they will stamp that document, all right, and they will assign a number on that document. So down the road, if you get involved in any sort of shenanigans with the local Selective Service System Board, you can state, as a matter of fact, that you've completed your obligation to notify the legislative branch of the government, the executive branch of the government, and you have notified the judicial branch of the government utilizing the notarization process with documentation that you properly registered, you properly submitted change of information forms, et cetera, attach whatever you want to that. Having done that, you will have basically completed what you need to know about establishing a claim. You'll have your claim established. I have to emphasize that you still have to defend your claim, and the burden of proof is entirely upon you. I can tell you right now that what they're basically going to be looking for are the objectors like yourselves, having come to this workshop, who have prima facie claims. In other words, claims which at first appearance or first glance, at face value, prima facie, first look, appear to be complete. And it's going to make a tremendous amount of difference for you to be able to go down there and say, well, here's a copy of my file, and oh, by the way, there's a conformed copy of this that's kept by my counselor at the local church. This is why the church needs to be involved. Okay, and my parents also have a copy of this. Okay, as a matter of fact, to be honest with you, it could be your mom or your dad who notices that you got a notice from the Selective Service System first, so you need to educate them. You only have 10 days to respond. Hopefully they will have a conformed copy, so if you're out hiking somewhere or you're out, discovering the country, which you should be doing, they can actually, with your prior approval and encouragement, just mail back your folder immediately upon receiving that notification from the Selective Service System, and you should convey to them select power of attorney so they can open your mail and be vigilant about the possibility of you receiving a draft notice. Currently, the Selective Service System is geared up to provide within a 30-day period 100,000 inductees. Right now, they have an attrition of 50%, which they freely admit. So in order to get 100,000 inductees, they're going to mail out 200,000 notices. So let's say somebody like John Kerry gets elected to be President of the United States. He's already said he wants to increase the active duty force by 40,000. Okay? If he can't get them through volunteers or by dangling paychecks in front of people, what he's going to have to do is he's going to have to say, all right, well, we got to get these 40,000 people, so there are going to be 80,000 notices that go out. All right? You have no way of knowing which of those notices are actually going to result in the process of an induction. And you have no way of knowing who they're going to go to. So you all have to be educated about this. And it could be a situation where maybe one person in the room here tonight actually gets a notice which is going to be acted upon, executing for them the possibility of an induction. Okay, so the rest of you as a community need to be available to support that individual, and attest to the fact that they were here at this meeting in the church, that you had a chance to meet this individual, and you were aware of the fact that they declared themselves to be a conscientious objector to war. Okay, so you need to keep track of who's here tonight, who your friends are, make a mental note about that, because those are the people who are going to be your resource persons. So you need to look to your neighbors, you need to look to the people in your community, to your religious leaders here at the church, and those are the people upon whom you can rely to actually be available to go with you or to provide an affidavit of fact that confirms that you are a conscientious objector to war. And you need to be thinking about how you're going to set up that little network of support for yourself. If you are so unlucky as to actually receive a notice, you know that you're entitled to a hearing. The most important thing is that you show up for the hearing. That you physically present yourself. I don't care if you have to come back from China, okay, or if you have to borrow $500 from your great aunt to fly yourself back to the local board, you have to show up. That hearing is just like any other court hearing, but there's a problem here. The problem here is that they've written the regulations so that you do not have any rights of appeal to the decision made by the local board unless you were able to persuade at least one of the members of that local board to agree with you that you are, in fact, a conscientious objector to war. The only exception to that would be if you just had been medevaced over to Harborview involved in some horrible accident or something, and then you have to have somebody else come to the board and actually give them the particulars about the fact that you're medically incapacitated. When you are in a legal situation where you're talking to people who basically have been selected out for the purpose of tripping you up, for the purpose of making you look like some sort of a political activist, or making you look like some sort of a philosopher out there on a limb by yourself with no connection whatsoever to any kind of religious tradition, beware. The Oxford Dictionary on Religion, when it gets around to defining what religion is, provides about 20 different definitions. Let me just read to you some of these definitions. And I leave it to you to pick and choose which of these definitions it is that you want to apply to your particular statement as a conscientious objector to war. And I want you to be empowered to define the terms. Here's one from Bella. A brief, handy definition of religion is considerably more difficult than a definition of evolution. So, for limited purposes only, let me define religion as a set of symbolic forms and acts which relate man to the ultimate conditions of his existence. It happens to be one that I really like. You need to be in control of your own destiny. And part of controlling your own destiny, if you're ever brought before a selective service system board, is to start defining the terms and to actually make the statement. This is how I define religion. These are my views, which are religious views. Here's another definition from Edward Tyler. It seems best to fall back at once on this essential source and simply to claim as a minimum definition of religion that it is a belief in spiritual beings. You might believe in yourself as a spiritual being. That's fine from the standpoint of the law. If you want to talk about your own personal theology, your own personal belief system, what I'm asking you to do is respect that belief system and not hesitate if you're ever called before a local selective service system hearing board to say, you know, I am a spiritual being. I have beliefs. I am a unique person. All right? And the authority for my beliefs is me. These are my beliefs. So your strategy right at the outset should be to define the terms in a manner favorable to you and to invoke the protection of the First Amendment of the United States Constitution and make sure that you endeavor to describe your particular beliefs as religious beliefs. And I encourage you all to think about that. I understand that in our area, 60% of the youth of this area are unchurched. They don't go to church, they don't belong to a church. However, church membership can be very effectively utilized. Seventh-day Adventists, for example, have a well-established policy where in their pioneer group they educate their youth to prepare to serve as medics in the military. It's called a 1AO option. You're a conscious objector, non-combatant. I do not recommend this. I recommend that you use the 1O approach. Now, my opinion is that the American military at this time and for the foreseeable future simply is not an environment which is good for young men or women of conscience. It's not a good environment. Hazing is actively practiced. Sexual harassment occurs all the time. There are all kinds of violations of basic contract law where people think that they've been guaranteed the right to go to such and such a school, or in fact, you know, the time comes up and their opportunity to go to that school is deferred. I mean, these are basically breaches of promise. You know, these are basically contractual violations. There's so many of these things that go on all the time, and all I have to do is just talk to the returning vets, and they'll give you the latest scoop on what's happening to them. Of course, what's happening to them now is that, you know, some of them were told they were going to go over to Iraq and they'd be there for a year and then they'd be able to come back. Well, they've been held over, they weren't allowed to come back. Some of them were reservists that when they got involved with the reserves were told that they would be kept here in the United States. So church membership is an important way to help strengthen and support your claim. Now, there's another side to this. The reality is that the majority of churches in the United States today adhere to a Catholic doctrine known as the just war doctrine. This is a slippery slope. But no matter, the just war doctrine is there, and it is something that you have to kind of contend with. And it's conceivable that you may in fact be involved with a denomination, or your parents may be involved with a denomination, where they actively believe in the just war doctrine, and therefore you may be getting a lot of flack from them. Is how to use additional secular means to strengthen and support your claim. One of the really important aspects is going to be the United Nations Charter. Okay, and I would direct you to, in this case, Chapter 6, Pacific Settlement of Disputes. This is the law of the land. Make no mistake about it. Why is it the law of the land? It's the law of the land because it was ratified overwhelmingly by both the United States Senate and the United States Congress. It is the same in terms of its legal status as the United States Constitution itself, because of the provisions of the Constitution vis-a-vis the ratification of treaties. Because you're not going to have any trouble taking this into federal district court. You're certainly not going to have any trouble taking the United States Constitution into federal district court. That's why federal district court exists. Okay? So, what you do is you include in your presentation just a very brief reference to the fact that you've read the section of the UN Charter on Pacific Settlement of Disputes, and that as a U.S. citizen, you strongly believe that the government is beholden to these provisions. How to prepare for a local selected service board review of your claim. It's going to require role-playing. You're going to have to invite somebody like me, or somebody from Seattle Draft and Military Counseling, or somebody from the Central Committee on Conscientious Objector, or American Friends Center on Conscience of War, somebody who's been in and out of the hearing process. Now, I'll be honest with you, most of the hearings that I've been to lately have involved active duty personnel trying to change status. Yes, they can at any time become a conscious objector to war, but there are certain rules that apply to them. And you do need to have somebody who's knowledgeable about those local rules and will actually rehearse you and say, well, what if they ask this? What if they ask this? What if they ask this? You need to be thinking about the appropriate demeanor for a judicial proceeding where, you don't go in there like the Chicago 8 and start hassling the chairperson of the board and start disputing everything that's happening and be an obstructionist. Because if you allow yourself to be characterized as an obstructionist, that will work to your disadvantage and will tend to devalue the quality of your claim before the local boards. My approach, to be honest with you, is that they're only going to allow you 20 minutes. That's your time. You and your parents are paying for that time. You're paying dearly for that time. Okay, so you should totally control what happens at the hearing. All right, the way to do that is to go through this litany of the documentary process. Otherwise, what you have is a situation of jeopardy. Okay, because you're going to have religious leaders from other churches who are well prepared to debate you on your particular interpretation of what Jesus did or did not say. Okay, they're going to be well prepared to counter any kind of an argument or suggestion that you might make based upon any of the doctrinal precepts of any of the denominations anywhere in the United States. They will have been rehearsed and coached. They will have gone to training sessions. They will actually have in their hand a recommendation of questions that they should pose to the objector. Okay, now, if you have a situation where you have an unfavorable ruling made by the local board with respect to your claim, and you show up at the hearing, and you're successful in persuading at least one of the members of that board that you really are a conscientious objector, well, then you have all the appellate processes that are available through federal district court. And at that point, I think you'll understand why it's so important that you actually complete that affidavit of fact. Because that affidavit of fact, you see, satisfies the requirements of federal district court where you're going to be able to make your appeal. And all you have to do then is get yourself a paralegal or an attorney, show them your copy of the notarized affidavit of fact, and that's the first thing that they're going to staple when they fill out the motion for appeal that goes to federal district court. So it's the preparatory work that you do at this stage that preserves your right of appeal and gets you through the door at federal district court. They've decided that they are not happy with the lottery system. What they want to do is they want to create pools for different groups. And that's exactly what they did this last revision for the selected service system. And the first group would be targeted based upon occupational classification for healthcare personnel. they've been targeted with what is known as a targeted selective draft. So they're going to throw healthcare personnel. Keep in mind that this was kind of a backdoor way to draft a lot of women without women even understanding what was happening to them. Women by far represent the majority of healthcare workers in the country. Because of the targeting of occupational groups, which obviously includes women, because of the effort by women who are in the active duty now to basically eliminate and dissolve the traditional roles of women in non-combative positions, because of the recommendations of the RAND Corporation report and so forth, women are at risk, and you should manage your liability to military conscription just as if you were a male. And the reality is that we all have to understand that this is a major change. And what happens to the healthcare personnel could very easily happen to computer programmers or engineers. So it could very well happen to other groups by virtue of their occupational classification, which effectively means that the lottery system is over. In other words, what's happened is that we've declared open season on particular occupational categories where the military wants them. So I have to leave you with the basic understanding here in our formal presentation that you are not dealing with a level playing field. You never were dealing with a level playing field. Therefore, you should not feel in any way reluctant or reticent about taking advantage of the system to take care of yourself. Because the system was never intended to be equitable. And it is not transforming itself into a more favorable and more equitable system at all. To the contrary, it's regressing to a system of targeted grafts, as I describe it, open season on particular occupational categories. Therefore, as we say in the civilian economy, buyer beware, objector beware, caveat emptor. You have to be the one that's in control of your destiny. You have to be the one who feels that you're empowered to take control of what's going to happen to you by virtue of this counterproductive system of military manpower recruitment. And even say manpower recruitment is obviously fallacious. Person procurement. And so you're the ones that need to take this information I've conveyed to you and apply it as best you can to the facts and circumstances of your own lives.
Marching on for peace, we are going.